So you're in New York, right? And when you're saying that is coming up to winter, I used to think, okay, well, if England is this side of the earth, and say America's the other side of the earth, that when we have a summer, you have a winter. But then somebody told me recently that there's this thing where it's like a Sophia, where even though the earth spins, it's it covers the same part of the earth, hence why Antarctica is always cold, for example. And in Australia or whatever, even though it's like say 24 hours on a plane, which you'd think you have to travel round 24 hours, it's still at the same hemisphere, I think is the correct word. And so winter's kind of the same for all of the main countries, and summer is, which I didn't realize until the age of 27.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, it's a ball, right? And it's as it's turning, the sun is, I guess it remains where it is. So as we're spinning, say you and I are on the same kind of wavelength, we're always the same distance from the sun. It's just at different points in the day. Um, I guess the part that doesn't make as much sense to me is that if Australia is further south than we are, they're further away from the sun. Why is it that they're so much hotter than we are? But I guess because they're also closer to the equator.
Yeah, and also it's like the more water you're close to, the more say moisture in the air, which does some kind of balancing act where it cools down quicker, does some shit like that. I don't know, but that might have a part to play with it. Or the fact that there's so much desert that it absorbs the heat and therefore it just retains it and then it just keeps going back up. Something to do with that. Like I was watching David Attenborough, his witness statement on Netflix, and he was saying that if the ice caps melt, then it means that the sun doesn't reflect back up into space. Instead, it will just go into the ocean and it will warm up, which ends up creating more rain and melts the icebergs. So maybe that's something to do with it when you think about how the water plays a part with the heat, and if there's no water, it's some kind of balance. But I've gone from not believing in global warming because I had flaws. I could always counteract an argument to knowing that there's many factors. It's not just like global warming, it's because of man, that's it. Reverse everything. There's many, many, many factors. But I've realized now that if humans want to continue the way that they're living, there has to be change. And I don't mean like stop flying and stop doing cars. There's ways of doing it, but I've suddenly changed my mind on this. And yeah, it is a very serious thing. And if I'm saying that, then it is.
Two questions then. One, what caused that change? Because it sounds like it's a pretty recent change. And two, um, do you believe that that is something that is partly caused by us, or is that a natural occurrence of the Earth? And over the course of history, it's something that's just going to keep happening. It's going to keep getting warmer. They're going to keep melting. They're going to keep refreezing, and it's reforming, and so on. And it's just a vicious cycle, just because that's the way our planet works.
So initially it was so David Attenborough, he's a BBC documentary person. What I used to say was is that over the 100 years of him filming the icebergs, he's seen them melt. And my argument was, well, the iceberg's been here for billions of years, right? Millions of years. So who was filming there to see over, say, 10,000 years they melt and then they freeze and then they melt and then they freeze? So I had arguments against, we haven't got enough proof over time to say it's just because of humans. And then for example, volcanoes take say years and years and years to build up heat and then they erupt, and it's the balance act. So let's just say that every say 50,000 years it gets really cold, really hot, really cold, really hot. And when it's really cold, things die and they frost and animals become extinct. There's like 5 mass extinctions, right? And obviously it is correct. There's always going to be extinctions, cold, hot, cold, hot. The difference is that let's just say the reason why these extinctions happen is because of extraordinary heat versus extraordinary cold. What humans are doing is they are essentially creating enough heat in 100 years that would have taken, say, 50,000 years. So the outcome's the same: mass extinction, icebergs melting, fires, storms, weather conditions. The only difference is that it's happening, say, in 100 years as opposed to 50,000 years. That's the massive change. Like, we've evolved so quick that we've essentially jumped into the future of what would have taken man, say, hundreds of years to learn. Let's just say that from the jungle to caveman fires to making a boat. That would have taken 400 years of ancestors learning how to make a boat. Now we've gone from boats to planes to cars to fucking electric, spaceship boats. We've done it so quickly. So we're essentially merging 50,000 years of evolution into one because we've reached our end of, we can't evolve anymore. Like the whole purpose of evolution is to learn how to eat and drink. That's it. We've done that. We've gone beyond it. So now we're destroying other natural parts of stuff to increase man's way of life, which is destroying nature. And it's because of nature that we were able to live like this in the first place. And this balancing act of how animals need the trees to do certain things. And we're taking down the trees to build more houses because there's more humans, and we're taking palm oil for medicine, which is why human beings are living a lot longer. So it's like we're not replenishing enough for the amount we're using.
But I mean, would you also say that, because it sounds like you're putting a limitation on our evolution, and I wouldn't say that the point that we're at as humans and as a society that we are necessarily meant to be limited in that way. I don't think that we have reached a peak in our evolution. I think we're on course to wherever it is we need to be. So, to us, to our brain and the way that we've evolved up until this point, it may seem like maybe this is all some sort of mistake or somehow we've screwed up and we're damaging the earth. But along with the evolution of the earth itself and the cycles that it goes through, we're still evolving. Who's to say that, 10,000 years from now, we may be faster, stronger, have better vision, the same way that right now a human will on average walk 3 or 4 miles per hour. That's only because we only need that ability to walk 3 or 4 miles per hour. If we needed the ability to run as fast as a cheetah, because for whatever reason we were, forever being chased by cheetahs, I feel like we would eventually evolve, and then suddenly our average would be 10 miles per hour or 20 miles per hour. Because, I mean, even when you're walking, as a human, the reason you walk so slow is because you have no reason to run that fast. And you're always looking down when you walk. When a cheetah's running, it's looking straight ahead. That's why it's able to run 60, 70 miles per hour. It has that ability because it's evolved up until that point. So, I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, we're still evolving the same way that anything else is. So certain things die out, certain things continue to evolve. Maybe we've evolved to the point where we've overproduced too much and there's too many humans. And that's all part of this master plan, where slowly humans will start to kind of go away, but then evolve into something else at the same time.
So I wrote a book and saying that we're all going to be extinct, say in 120 years, and then I realized that wasn't clear. What I meant was civilization, societies as we know it will change, and we won't be like wiped out. There's no humans on the planet. It's just the extinction of way life is. It will go back to like say small tribes. So let's just say that capitalism relies on workers, right? And so like the coronavirus, there's nobody working. All the big companies of all the billions in the bank will just go bust. For example, if we've got a cinema chain, let's say they make 100 million in a year. They've lost 1.2 billion in 9 months because of the amount of money and overheads that are involved making all this extra money. So it's the change of how a business can just go down is phenomenal. And so when you think about how too many humans and there's too many problems like trees too close together and then there's fires because they're too close together, all these big companies will just go bust and they can't reach out across the world like they do, like Just Eat. They can literally reach anywhere in the world because of this massive network, but without the people then they are unable to make all that money. And so without this system, these big people can't provide all the food for every single human, and therefore you're left with just local farming basically. So the evolution of man, has it come to an end? It's more it has to change. And so nature, the balance of nature, like everything is perfectly balanced, and humans are taking over the space of nature, which is damaging the wildlife which we need to eat to live on. And so we're not replenishing our energy sources, and that is where, as humans are growing and there's less natural resources, it's going to run out. It's like if you've got seven coat hangers in the wardrobe, you've got 8 tops. One top has to go, or you need to get another coat hanger. And what you're doing is you're buying more clothes, and not increasing the size of your wardrobe and increasing hangers. That's what's happening. We are staying with the amount of hangers we've got. In fact, we're losing hangers and we're getting more clothes. And that is what has really significantly changed my mind, because I understand that if you like, it's just maths. If
Well,
you
I think
keep cluttering your house, you're gonna have no room eventually, and that's what's happening.
no, I agree with the analogy. I just think that that proves a deficiency in not the evolution of humanity, it's the evolution of the system in which we are living.
Yes, that I can
So
agree.
so I think that the capitalistic city, the way that the cities are structured, the way that the government is structured, I think that that needs to be looked at closer, because it's not so much us. I don't think we're necessarily the problem. It's the system that we've created and that we've adapted. We've agreed to go along with it, and up until this point, maybe it's worked for some people, but not everyone, and it continues to grow because the people who have benefited from it continue to benefit, and then they force it onto everyone else. So let's say like the 1%, that's doing extremely well, and they they are profoundly rich, and they are going to maintain that wealth throughout history until something like this occurs. And now suddenly these companies are losing billions of dollars. They don't know what to do. At the end of the day, countries like ours, we're businesses. If a business cannot open its doors and exchange goods and services for money, they're going to shutter. And that's essentially what's happening right now. So the United States actually is a corporation. I mean, if you look it up, it's filed as a business. It's business first, country secondary. So if you're going to look at it from that standpoint, they need to revisit, how is this business structured? Is it being run correctly? Which, I mean, the answer is no. But the answer is also, it never has been. It works for only certain people. And I like your tribe mentality, because there's a certain earnesty to it. There's a certain thing to it that's very nice. The idea sounds great. Where let's say I create a clay pot and I come to you and I'm like, hey, those sweaters you make? I'd love to get one of those in exchange for this clay pot. And you're like, oh yeah, that's a great pot. I'll take it. And we're done. That'll work on a smaller scale. That'll work if you and I live in the same village and there's 20 other people. How's that going to work for 7 billion people? So there has to be some sort of system. And I think, if you're comparing, communism to capitalism, I'll take capitalism, any day of the week. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a system in which people have the ability to go to work every day you work. And let's say the harder you study, the better the job you get, the more money you make, the more successful you are. That's basically the way it's structured. And not everybody has the same opportunities. Everybody's born to different parents in different parts of the world. So you have no say in that. But the one thing that you can do is seize whatever opportunities you do have, and say, if somebody is really privileged and they grow up in a great neighborhood and they can go to great schools, and they're only half as smart as the kid who grew up in a very, very, underprivileged neighborhood, went to terrible schools, but then they worked twice as hard to get to the same place as that privileged kid. Now they both go to the same college. They could both apply to the same job and have the same opportunity to be equally as successful. In my mind, that system works as long as it's fair to everyone.
Yeah, I think that man thinks it's God, and when it doesn't have the power of God, then it's confused, and it's like you're no different to a tree or part of nature. When trees grow and they get too big, they get too close, and then they compete, and then the weak ones die. And then let's just say there's a fungus on the tree, it takes all the trees down, or say a forest fire, and it starts again. So if you look at nature, there's always a limit of, let's just say, a maximum population or maximum like amount of animals in a jungle or whatever, and then it always goes down. So when you think, okay, if we're no different to nature, that has to happen to us. Like we're going to reach a peak of something where there's too many humans, not enough food. And so either that, and so the only answer is that humans die so that the difference between having food and humans are balanced out. And then when you go above that threshold, then it comes back down again. And what David Attenborough is saying is that the only way out of this situation is to reach the human population threshold. And he was saying that Japanese people used to have, say, on average 3 kids a year over the last, say, X amount of years, and now they've gone down to 2. And he's saying that they've reached their threshold. And in animal kingdoms, there has to be like enough space for cows. And once they have enough cattle that it takes over, that there's kind of no space, and then they compete, and then whatever. So there's always a threshold. So if humans are this amazing intelligent species and we're just going to keep growing because we're not going to allow ourselves to be defeated by ourselves, but that is obviously, that's a big problem, because that's like having too many trees and they're not burning down for some weird reason. Like they're supposed to be burning to start that again, or there's a mushroom fungus and it's not killing the other trees. It's like you're fucking up nature. You sprayed a tree with a certain chemical to stop it from, destroying it, and you need that cycle. And that cycle, to me, in terms of humanity, is going from kind of the bigger you are, going down to the small tribe bit, like companies helping everyone, food supply thing. Well, the answer is, if you look at nature, is that we do go to like smaller tribes, smaller governments, smaller states. I mean, what do you reckon? That has to be the only option, right? Where the bigger you are, the harder you fall. You're only going to come down, and you only go back to where you came from, which is just trading locally, because it went from local to big. So it has to go from big to small, right?
Well, if it's going to go from big to small, I mean, whose responsibility is it at the end of the day to provide all those things? Because you're saying, is it government or is it the big corporations? Because in reality, those big corporations are just run by people. I mean, the government plays some part in it, and they're all in bed together because there's, tax incentives and, who knows what other kind of deals are going on under the table. But at the end of the day, these companies, let's say a company like Coca-Cola, like what is their civil responsibility to take care of the planet?
Yeah. So you know how you've got, say, senates, and then you've got is it Congress, the one below that, who run the small places, Senate and Congress?
Right.
So you're saying, is it going to be private, like companies or governments? I think it's going to be how it should be. You've got the Senate, which is connected to the politics, but then you've got the congressman that's more closer to the people. That's how it should be. It should be the people, not the politics. Let's say the politics and the corporations are one. Well, it's just going to be local people that simply don't have any involvement with politics. So like the congressman, but he doesn't have any obligation to the politicians. He literally is just, say, you running your local town, then you've got somebody else running the next town. And I don't mean all New York, like one congressman for New York. I mean, in New York, there's, say, loads of different, let's say, the cities, right? So there'll be, say, 100 people in New York running their own small local people, because if there's no cars, you can only really walk in a day up to maybe 2 hours if you're really fit, because then you've got to come back to 2 hours, right? So you don't need to have anyone leading your community outside, say, I don't know, 20 miles. And let's say New York is, say, 100 miles, whatever it is, like London. Fuck me, you only need like one person per 30-mile radius. And so I think that's what it's going to be, where governments are going to run the places that, say, can't be run themselves, but the people that can, they won't want anything to do with politics. They'll create their own rules, their own regulations, their own food supply. It'll be fair trade. Everyone's going to be trading equally. Well, I do believe at some point everything's going to be at the value of a pound, because what it's saying is that when you've got too many barbers opening up, too many car places, too many salons, and they're all competing like petrol stations, the only way to compete is to go down and to go down and to go down. And with everyone trying to do the same thing, it's only going to go down and down and down and down and down, and to the point where you're going to be trading a laptop for the same value as a back massage, or a pottery for the same value as a wardrobe, because it's all going to have £1 value, because you traded everything for something. And let's just say you traded a wardrobe worth 50 quid for a laptop worth 500 quid. At some point, someone's going to trade you their kitchen's fridge worth 1,000 quid for a garden replacement, where you do their garden up. So you might lose that value selling your laptop for a wardrobe, but you're going to get it back because somebody else wanted your fridge for something worth more. So it's all going to balance up. So to your question, politics or companies, I reckon it's just going to be like small local people, which is how it should be. Your constituent, they're supposed to represent the people. Obviously it's not like that, and they are sucked up by politicians, but it has to go down to that, even if you do the maths and the science and how nature is.
I just think that based on human nature, based on the way that we are, we as we're trying to abide by this system that is supposed to work. And in a perfect world, everything you just described technically does exist, because then, let's say for New York, there's a governor, then these cities have mayors, and below the mayors, there's other people who work locally on a local political level. So, there's each town has like a chamber of commerce, and then there's anyone that's involved in, voting on school budgets and things like that. So it is kind of broken down almost to that level that you described. I just think that at some point we kind of lost our way, and people get involved for the wrong reasons. Human nature gets in the way. People get greedy, people want power, people want money, and ultimately that's what ends up corrupting a proper system. So, I guess to your point, that does exist, but again, I don't know that it would work as far as like a small village mentality, this tribal thing where we're going around trading, because one, at a certain point in the short term, it would be like, no, I'm not going to trade you a coffee mug for a car. That's ridiculous. But eventually it would all just kind of even out. Let's say over the course of 100 years, everything would lose its value, and the value really becomes in whether or not you need this item. How bad do you need a
Yes.
car versus how bad do you need this coffee mug? So, so eventually, maybe not in our lifetime or our kids' lifetimes, but at some point that would have to balance out to not a dollar amount. It would be more of a just how bad do you need it. So depending on what you do, let's say if somebody is the local baker and he needs a new oven, I don't need a new oven. I most certainly not a commercial oven, but if he really needs it, I could trade him something that I don't need. You know what I mean? So, um, a lot of that depends on your needs and the way that society is structured. A lot of things won't exist anymore. So like you said, the movie theaters, like, who gives a shit about movie theaters? Like, movie theaters we can all watch it from home now. Everything's streaming. You know what I mean? You're on the other side of the planet and we're talking in real time. Like, at what point do I need to go and overpay to see a movie in a cold theater that I'm not even comfortable in with a bunch of strangers? So a lot of things will have to go away. But the same way that it's always happened. Think about whatever weird stuff they used to do back in the day, and we look at that and we're like, that's weird. Like, who does that? But 100 years from now, people are going to look back and be like, they used to sit in the same room and just with strangers and laugh. Like, I'm right here in my living room. Like, and I've got this VR headset on, and I'm getting the best experience of my life, and I'm with my friends and family. I don't need to go to the theater and sit with strangers. So it's the mentality changes over time based on our needs and what's available to us. And if the theaters aren't there anymore, in the short term, it's like, oh no, the theaters. In the long term, it's like, yeah, screw it. Who needs theaters? So that's always going to continue. That's just based on what we want and what we need. And if that's not going to survive in terms of business, then that's unfortunate for everybody who's affected by that on on an emotional level, on a financial level. But they'll move on to something else. The same people that are ticket takers at the movie theater right now are going to go work at Lowe's and McDonald's and Tesco in your case. And
How do you know about Tesco? How do you know about Tesco?
It's like the Walmart of
Yeah.
England, isn't it?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
funny. It's funny hearing you say that.
Yeah. And so, I guess everything there will be a shift. And I think that shift is what we're all kind of slowly starting to creep into now. And it's what's scaring us as a society, because shifts like that affect us economically and that you could visually see happening, that's scary. It's something where thousands of people are in danger of losing their livelihood. Um, you know, People have to prepare themselves so that they aren't stuck in that position. You know what I mean? Like, I always tell like anybody that I talk to who's uncertain of, what position they want in life, what career do they want, just pick something safe. Pick something that people are always going to want or need. You know what I mean? Don't go to college, take out $150,000 worth of student loans, go for a freaking liberal art degree where it's so vague. Like, you literally have a degree in nothing, but now you're heavily indebted to the banks, the government, and for what? Because now you're going to end up getting the same job you would have got had you gone to, let's say, a trade school where in 2 years you paid a fraction of that amount, learned a trade, and now it's a trade that people need. So let's say shit really hits the fan and everyone's in trouble and we're down to the bare necessities. Um, you know how to fix an HVAC unit. You know how to do plumbing. There's certain things that we can't really do without, So I think those are the things that people need to kind of focus on. Like, what are the bare necessities and how do I get my hands on that kind of training?
Yeah, like the lesson that anyone can argue with is that what's here will go, what goes up, what's come down. All good things come to an end. Like, for example, the best stock I would have said to invest in was, say, 3 years ago, would be McDonald's because they keep going up. But
Mhm.
you don't consider if something like the coronavirus happens, where all of a sudden they've got to shut stores, and how that has a massive effect on everything. So when you think about, okay, well, McDonald's surely is safe as opposed to another company, you realize nothing is safe. The same as if you build a house by the ocean, you might not be on the coast, but you have a good chance of getting wiped out by a tsunami. So when you think about nature, nature's lucky to be here. It could go any minute, and we are too comfortable with having luxury of life. Everything, cinema, food, everything's brought to us that we don't realize a storm could literally penetrate through the ceiling of our house and kill us all. And so,
Right.
yeah, we're shocked when we hear things like, "Oh no, cinemas are going bust." Oh my God, that's like when I was a kid, I remember going to the first cinema, watching a movie with my friends, and we start thinking life's coming to an end. And it's not life's coming to an end, it's the cycle. It's like you could say we've reached the end of a cycle. Like you have this peak of Pokemon cards and a peak of MySpace and then Bebo and then Facebook and then Instagram. There's always peaks. And maybe the next thing is TikTok. And Instagram will be dead one day. um it was Skype and now it's Zoom. Everything does come to an end, and I think that we've been disillusioned by having all this everything there for, not, you can't even say like 5 years, because it hasn't. It's just we've become so focused on having everything we want that we're not used to having things taken away. And a simple thing like having a restaurant that you go to every week closing down and going bust, you're like, holy shit, like what's going on? And
Right.
saying how we need jobs like plumbing where someone's always going to need a plumber. I mean, even you could say that's not safe, because if people start to live in, say, tents or caves or caravans or something, so they can travel and they're not set in a place where you need to pay land, taxes, mortgage, fucking banks, everything, you don't need a plumber because you just go piss in the woods. So, everything does eventually come to an end. And I do think that the coronavirus is essentially the same as having too many trees close together and there's a fire and it takes all the trees down. Too many humans close together, too many chickens in a coop close together. If you look on, say, Google Maps, you look at, say, natural pictures, you always see gaps. And they just say they're ring circles of, say, aliens, right? But you know how trees have always got, say, exactly, say, let's call it 4 meters between each tree, or animals, they've always got the same distance, or even people on the beach, yeah, seaside beach sunbathing. There's always a certain amount of gap. There's always a certain amount of space between other things. Obviously, there's roots underground taking all the nutrients, but there's always a certain gap. And if you violate the laws of what that gap's for, chickens in a cage, humans together in a cinema, coughing, catching the flu, just going against nature. And so the coronavirus thing you could say is that, we've become so, we have medicine, we don't have illnesses all the time, so we get closer together because you just take a tablet. But eventually, there's going to be too many humans close together, too much flu at one time, where there's not enough vaccines to stop that flu from spreading, that it's going to spread exponentially, where you haven't got a jab or a flu jab ready to stop that. And so now what's happening is that all these chickens in a cage, which people have been saying for years, animal acts, whatever, health reasons. Well, it's just nature saying too many people close together. We haven't allowed the woods to burn down. These chickens are too close. Humans are too close. We've now spread it. And it's the
Right.
way of the universe balancing itself out again.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way it is. I mean, at the same time, we, just like any other animal, are designed to survive, and we're going to do whatever we need to in order to survive. I think humans have become way too comfortable with their lifestyle to ever just settle for pissing in the woods. I think there's maybe a handful that would go that route, but I
I'd
feel
rather
like the
piss in the woods.
majority I piss everywhere. But I think that we're just too comfortable as a society, but not because we're spoiled, not because we're bad. It's because we've structured it this way. We've worked towards this for, I mean, how many years now? 100,000 years. Um, we're at this point because we want to be at this point. It's unfortunate that the virus happened. I don't think anticipating that. But the reality is that we are where we are because we built this. We evolved to the point where our brains were had the capacity to build computers and build cars and planes and all these things. And none of these things are a mistake. And I don't really think that any of them are really bad. They need closer. They need better regulations. They need standards. And for pollution reasons, for safety reasons, the standardization of all of these things needs to exist. But I also think that they're all really amazing things that we as a society have, over, all these years have created for ourselves so that we have a more comfortable life. I don't have to travel by foot to get somewhere. If I wanted to come see you, I could literally be at your house in like 10 hours, sitting in that room with you. Like, that's amazing. And that's not an accident. That's something that we said, okay, we need to travel for whatever reason, good, bad, but we need to be there. How do we get there faster? And people figured it out. We need to exchange information faster. Paperwork, it's taking too long. So we invented computers and calculators. So we have that capability. I think it's extraordinary what we've done and what we continue to do. But it's that, nobody is really taking a close look at how these things are regulated, and it's kind of just a free for all. But to my point, we got to that point because we wanted to. None of this is an accident. I think we're going to continue to evolve. I think that if you're saying that there's too many people on the planet, and how do we feed all these people? We as humans are intelligent enough to say, okay, and I've seen this already being done. There's not enough food, so we're gonna take, tofu and proteins and this and that, and we're gonna start to 3D print steaks, and we're gonna 3D print our food because we're human and we're awesome, and that's what we're gonna do from now on. So if there's a food shortage, every household gets a 3D printer. We print our own food. I mean, it may not taste as good, but we'll survive. We'll survive another 100,000 years off 3D printed food. But I'm not saying that's the solution. That's not the end all, but it's an option. We're always going to come up with options because naturally we are built to survive. The same way that you came from your father, and naturally he came from his father, and so on. That was no accident. Like, we were designed to continue. Just like any other animal, any other species, any other virus. Even a virus. I mean, everything is designed to move forward.
When you think about how we have evolved through intelligence and learning from the past mistakes, so our brains have always been used to learn, to keep evolving. And now let's just say AI, we've got things doing it for us. Well, if that means that our brains aren't being used and stimulated in the way they once were, that means that the next generation won't be using their brains from birth like we all have been over ancestral periods, which means that if our brains aren't being used, they're not being stimulated, we're becoming dumb. So when you become dumb, you can't think. And then when you can't think, you can't reprogram AI because it's only listening to what we've programmed it based on what we've learned. So at some point, the computer's going to be there like, so what would you like me to do? And then you're like, oh, I don't know. What do you want to do? I
Wipe
don't
my
know.
ass.
I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? Like, there's no intellect to teach it anymore. So that's essentially a chimp going from on all fours, reaching up to pick fruit, back down to all fours because it's just like, bleh, it's like crumbling down on its phone, like, help me. So when you look at it like that, that's realistic. But what do you think when that does happen? When we get too dumb from using AI, we can't program AI because 100 years later, the last person who was on the planet with a brain died, like over 100-year period. Now you just got dumb retards everywhere, and this computer just wanted to be commanded. We all just die.
Well, again, that's something we created. And I think ultimately with AI, with overuse of cell phones, people not communicating the same way that we are used to typically conversing with other people. If you're communicating with someone, you're used to using your phone, you're used to just calling people, then slowly that's turned into texting. And eventually that'll turn into who knows what. Or even like with AIs, where we're going to rely on them to do certain things for us. I think from an evolutionary standpoint, it's going to hurt us in some areas the same way that it would help us in some areas. So one thing that I've noticed, right, with the evolution of the internet, so in the United States, there's the East Coast, there's the West Coast, and then there's everything in between. And for years and years and years, the joke was always like, oh, the closer you get to the middle, like the slower you are, because there's just a lack of people, there's a lack of information. And as close to, you could see this on TV shows in like the late 80s. You put on TV in the late 80s and it's like, where are you from? I'm from Arkansas, and people are like, yeah, okay. So, but nowadays the difference is, look at what the internet's done for everyone. I can meet someone from any part of the country, and the internet has completely leveled the playing field. So I've met the most intelligent people, and they're from Missouri, they're from Kansas, they're from, Montana. Go back 20 years, 30 years, and that wouldn't be the case. Like, you would go there kind of, it's almost like when, like a fast talking city boy shows up at like, like somewhere in like the Midwest, and they're just like, who's that? And he's like taking advantage of all the locals and like sleeping with all the ladies and stealing from the banks because like he's just outsmarted everyone. But now it doesn't matter where you go. The internet's made everyone more intelligent, whether we realize it or not. The problem is we don't even realize how much more intelligent we've become in such a short amount of time. I think because we have so much information at our fingertips that we almost became like, we have the ability to become so smart, and it's almost as though we're not even taking advantage. So I used to have to look something up. I would have to either wait until like I met someone, to ask my teacher at school, or went to the library or something to get one bit of information. And now I'm just like, like like, hey Siri, what's Oliver's favorite food? And she's like, tuna sandwich. So I know, like it may seem like we're evolving in the wrong direction, but I think even with having AIs, I agree that it will make people way more socially awkward. I'm already seeing that in millennials. I'm seeing that in the next generation and the next one. It's making people more socially awkward. Through one of my past jobs, we had like an internal instant messaging system, and these people are chatting all day long, and there's times where I would be chatting with 8 or 9 people all at once about 8 or 9 different jobs, and in that they're having conversations with you, and how was your weekend and this and that, and then you see them in the office and they're sitting in their cubicle like awkward little shits, and you're like, oh hey Joe, and he's like, huh? Like, he can't even respond to you. He doesn't even know what to say face to face with a person because he's so used to just typing to people. And when they're typing to each other, they're speaking really quickly, and they know exactly how to get their thoughts across. But in person, it's a total night and day contrast. So I think in those ways, maybe in a social way, it almost made us more social, but way more socially awkward because we don't know how to interact in person. And like, that's a huge negative, I think. But that's also just my generation. That's my experience because I grew up, I was born in 81. So for me, I'm looking at it from, this older guy's standpoint where, if somebody wants to talk to me, just pick up the phone and call me, and now everything is done through text. I'm like, okay, fine. But I'm not getting any of my points across. You don't know what tone I'm writing in. You don't know if I'm yelling at you or if I'm being really nice or if I'm being facetious or what. Like, you don't know if I'm being sarcastic. So it's taking a lot of that away. You're taking a lot of that aspect of our conversation out of the whole thing. And people, everything. So basically, like, our entire society is a monotone right now. And we're all communicating. So unless you're writing in all caps and using 10 exclamation marks, I don't know what tone you're writing in. And
Yeah.
I think that ultimately, with as far as like the AI, I think it's going to be a very similar thing where we're going to get a lot better from it in a lot of ways, and at the same time, it's going to hurt us in those ways as well.
Yeah, everyone's going to be autistic. So an autistic person is in his head. He knows exactly what's going on. Think about what Siri is. Siri doesn't say anything until you ask him, and he fucking knows everything. That's an autistic person. So what is an autistic person? Someone who has it all in his head but can't demonstrate it. We're the opposite. We're using all this in our head shit to communicate, but yet we can't communicate to actual people. So you could say it's just how the brain is, and we make things in. It's like the unconscious mind is now in the conscious, which is the device. But yet, because it's in the device, we don't need to do it consciously, which is why we're all on our computers, all on Xbox Live, texting the information. But people say, you're born with autism. I believe that all these names are just traits given to somebody's mindset at that time. Like if you've got anxiety, cancer, it's the state which your body and mind is in at that time. It doesn't mean it's going to be there forever. Someone who's autistic, say at 4, doesn't mean he's going to have autism at 50. Someone who's got cancer at 10 doesn't mean they're going to have the cancer cells in their 11. It doesn't stay the same. So we believe that these terms define us forever and we're just that forever. We're not. That person was autistic because, let's just say, he had a father which always gave him advice. Other kids at school didn't have that father to give advice to, so they would all have to talk to each other to get it. This kid's already got it, so he doesn't need to talk. So the more he doesn't talk, the more he doesn't fit in, the more he just speaks to Jesus in his head. So now you've got this kid sort of just going off, looking at trees like an autistic person does, admiring nature, but you think he's a weirdo, and it's the complete opposite. So now everyone's going to become those traits where we're in our head, we're not speaking to people, and we've all got the knowledge. It's only when you speak to people that you realize they actually know shit. But I mean, that's just the way it's come. And I made myself dyslexic on purpose to prove that you can create these traits. I had Tourette's and I cured Tourette's by understanding what Tourette's was. I've done the opposite to all this shit. So things can be reversed as they can be created. And I do agree that it's the system that needs to change, not the people. Because if you think about politicians and big CEOs, they know exactly what's going on, but they're waiting for politics to come down and say, you got to change this. They're taking advantage of what they can get away with until they can't. So everyone knows what's going on. So it's almost like all this Weinstein shit. Who's going to be the first person to try and take it down? And when you get momentum, then things change. The same as, say, global warming, whatever. It's only when there's loads of storms and loads of issues and loads of people dying, big corporations, they're losing their jobs and they're losing their homes, and politicians are dying, that then there's going to be change. And I do believe that we only learn through pain. You only learn to bring your jacket if your friend isn't there to bail you out and give you his jacket. So no matter how many documentaries David Attenborough does, how many people go outside Washington and Parliament saying global warming, really, there's only going to be change when enough people are affected. Then it's going to change. So I believe that there's a way of nature. It's almost like no matter what you do, the outcomes are the same. If you try and take something down, it's only going to fall if it's supposed to. And you could try and take it down. It's just going to fall when it does. The balance always does happen. But yeah, system needs to change. Like the school system was once just one person in a tribe wanting his followers to work for him rather than him doing it, that he created a school. So he says, right, if you want to chop down this tree, I'll let you stay in my house, right, which I've already built, if you chop down another tree for my friend or my family to live in, which is the school system teaching 30 people and allowing them to stay on site, boarding school. And then that system was so efficient to basically, you're teaching people how to work for you, right? You want somebody to do this, you teach them how to do it. That's the school system. And let's just say that the university system is just working for an establishment, IT, accounts, whatever. Well, you're just working for the people and teaching them how to work for them whilst they fuck off and live on an island and go on holiday. And this system became so big and other people got involved that policies were created to teach these people more efficiently how to do that. And then the school system, everyone goes to school, they go to college, they go to uni, and then they're all part of the system. And it's just like an outdated system, basically. The system has to change.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Yeah, I mean, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. I mean, if you look at it from not, the United States being a country. If you look at it as being a business, it's essentially what you just said. We're all working so that we could contribute to society, so we could contribute taxes, so that the government can continue and the wheels keep on spinning. And that's not necessarily the worst idea. It's just that I think ultimately what ends up happening is that nobody can control such a large system. It's like, think about how many moving parts there are to local government, to federal, to everything. And nobody's going to be good at that job ever. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be leadership, but I think that the approach and the way that the hierarchy is just ridiculous. I think people spending way too much time in the positions that they're in versus moving on, let's say moving up or moving out. There's politicians who are there 40, 50 years who do nothing. And then there's ones that are there for the same amount of time, and they're very good at what they do. So, to be honest, I don't really care much for either side, because I feel like both sides need to be corrected, and neither one of them are working together. I mean, look at what's happening right now. I'm not going to get too political, but if you look at it, the reason the system is so screwed is because they're so at odds about, who's better, who's the bigger piece of crap, versus like, I mean, if we were in such economic turmoil right now, like, why would they be spending millions, if not billions of dollars, just suing each other every single day, campaigning like this against each other? Like, there should literally just be one system and everybody votes, and that's the end of it. And then that would, make it fair, versus like a million different parties. You can believe in whatever you want to believe in. Some things, carry more weight than others. I think that, looking at our our food source and nature is important. I'm less concerned with the number of trees that are being used to produce certain items as I am the, certain other things where maybe trees have to do with, the animals and all of that. It's obviously like a domino effect. So every time, everything you look at is going to have some sort of consequence. But, there's certain things that I feel like are really, it's worth fighting for, and it's worth changing. As far as, the going back to the ice caps melting, I think that, something like that, where they're going to spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars researching, whereas right now there's like 12 million people that are out of work in the United States because of the virus. It's probably even more than that, but let's just say it's 12. How much more significant and helpful would that money be to those, 12 million people versus taking like $200 million and researching the ice caps? Like, can we all just fucking pause for a minute and focus on our immediate needs? Research, the fucking North Pole. Like, certain things it's nice to know, like, what's going to happen to us 1,000 years from now, but what's happening right now seems to be less of a concern. You're looking at the way that the like Democrats and Republicans are fighting over like stimulus packages in the United States, and the Democrats are trying to leverage, hundreds of millions of dollars for art programs and, like stuff that is so irrelevant, that has nothing to do with actually helping people. But because the money's there, they're saying, well, we're not going to push this deal through unless you give $25 million to the John F. Kennedy Art Center. Really? And that's what made me question the entire thing. And I'm not going to say that people aren't affected. I'm not saying people aren't getting sick, but that did make me question the entire thing and the legitimacy of it, because I feel like everyone's using it to their advantage, and left and right. I think everybody's at fault at this point. And, it's, to me, that's how fucked the system is. That's just one very small example.
It's interesting because if you just said and analyze what I'm saying about global warming, it's the same thing. Politics, they're taking the nutrients and the money and using up all the resources, and everyone's trying to chip in and get it before it runs out. It does run out. So it's like, do you stay present knowing tomorrow or in 5 minutes you can suddenly die? Okay, a lightning bolt could come through, a bear could come and eat you? Or do you prepare for the future, meaning I need to know how I'm going to get food for the future? So do I get everyone back into work now so they can feed themselves for tomorrow? Or do I research the ice caps melting, knowing in 10 years that this could have a massive effect on all of our food resources to the point where we're not going to be here in 10 years? So it's this balance between present and future. It's almost like you've got money in the bank sitting there. You can go out and spend it on stuff, go on holiday, go and whatever. Or do you invest it in stocks? Those stocks you could lose and you would wish you just stayed with what you had. Or you can invest for the future, everything, because you get more in the future, but then you can't go out to the cinema, you can't go on holiday now. So there's no right and wrong answer between like present and future because it is all one. Like think about forget time and calendars, it is all one. Animals, they don't know anything but just to graze, and then they're just grazing and then they die. They don't have the intelligence to know that if I keep grazing and grazing and grazing and migrating, that eventually we might meet a stream and I can't get to more grass because I've not got a boat to get myself across. And it's humans like knowing where we're going versus where we are. Animals just, they're just there. So there is no balance between right and wrong. But when you think about how, the Kennedy Center thing, that does translate to I need to cut down this palm tree to for this medicine to keep me alive for the future. But if I cut down this palm tree, then it's going to imbalance, say, the food habitats where I might not have any food for the future. If I don't do this, then this is going to happen, which is what politics is. I'll only do this if I can get this. And it's just we're running out of resources and let's just say a resource is a need. Big trees eventually they may kill all the small trees, but as the new trees from a distance start to grow, there's so many small trees that it can compete against the nutrients of the big tree that big tree falls. So politics are supposed to have a leader, he does what he needs to do, and then somebody else moves in. But humans are smart, they keep themselves in. Where if you look at nature, that big tree does eventually fall. The bigger it is, the more it needs to support, and it falls. But in politics, it doesn't fall. They're still there. So yeah, the natural system, the global warming system, is the same as the political system, but we've manipulated it, or the people in power have manipulated it, where they've made like support frames for the tree where it doesn't fall, or they've cemented the ground so the tree doesn't fall,
Right,
and
right.
so
They
the
keep patching
system,
it up.
yeah,
The support frame that you're talking about is a bunch of chopsticks holding up a huge tree.
all bankers and like big corporations funding these people to keep them in, like Facebook ads to get somebody in the middle of nowhere to get their money and vote, whereas years ago it was just your local people. Oh, did you, somebody else across the country voted the same by charts and then they're in. um yeah yeah, it's interesting you said the political system is the same as the natural system. The only difference is that when a tree's supposed to fall because it's too big, it doesn't. And that's where the imbalance of global warming is, where you've got this, the balance is supposed to balance things up and it's not. The animals are supposed to be in that forest to eat the bananas, to go off and shit the banana seeds, which create more trees, which create the cycle. But now there's no trees, there's no bananas, and there's no animals. The politics are supposed to fuck off, not be there for 50 years.
Right,
It is funny how
right.
they're all old, isn't it?
Well, I mean, look,
They're all
it's
fucking 70.
I mean, everything you just said, plus the system in terms of, like a capitalism, right? So we were talking about that. And I feel like this all kind of came full circle. So
Yes.
you're saying they're studying the ice caps. How much do you think they spend a year? And I don't know the answer. I'm asking
I
what
don't.
what
I
what
have no
what
idea.
your estimation
I
is. I mean,
didn't believe in all this shit until like literally last night, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not that the ice caps are specifically the problem or that specifically global warming. It's that it's all the other things that add up
mhm,
to one thing.
right,
It's all the different things that collectively make it. You know.
correct. Yeah. So I guess it's like let's just say we agree that it's $100 million a year in research, which I know to any government, a big government like ours, is probably a drop in the bucket. But let's say it's $100 million, and we already talked about how the good that would do for all the people that have no jobs. But what I'm getting at is that if you, what exactly is that $100 million buying us? That's buying us equipment to do the research, and then basically what, paying scientists for their time to study it, to collect the research, to collect the data and study it. Um, if humanity was so concerned with doing right and the good of mankind, why wouldn't some big company like, I don't know, Nikon or Dell or something, who has the ability and the supplies to build the equipment out of the goodness of their heart, and then the scientists who went to school and actually understand how to measure, the water level correctly, and how old is this glacier and so on, why don't they do that out of the goodness of their heart versus having to pay some government, having get paid by a government, millions and millions of dollars to do these things? So that kind of encompasses everything we're talking about. It's a money thing, because if it were a tribal approach, everybody would just be doing it because we know that we have to do it in order to protect ourselves in the future and protect our kids and their kids. But the reality is that people are only interested in making money. And I think that's what all this is about.
Yeah, so it comes down to you will share your pizza if you've had enough yourself. But if you haven't had enough yourself and you're still hungry, then you'll eat your pizza and tell your friend to fuck off and have what's left. It's like Bitcoin. When it's good, everyone's happy. But when it starts to go down, everyone cashes out and takes. It's the dog eat dog effect in reverse. If you look at an animal carcass, it will take what it needs and then it will go when it's full up. And then you've got the other animals that will just say no, fuck off, back off, and that's a selfish prick and takes it up a tree it takes an animal up a tree, and all the other animals are starving. What I'm getting at is that in life it's about the majority. Republican, Democrat, yin and yang, one or two, black and white in the casino. There's no right or wrong. It's a spectrum of grey. Do you invest the money for ice caps, knowing what I've just said about the future and there's no food? Or do you put everyone to work who need it now? There is no black or white. It's what Republican Democrats, it's almost like, say, 60-40 difference between 150 million versus 120 million versus 170 million. So, yeah, they got the majority, but they're still exactly, let's just say, half, 50-50. There's no right or wrong. And that's the whole point. It comes down to, I'm a big animal on this bit of land. You're a big animal. We both want the land. Are we going to kill each other to fight for it? Or do you just stay over there and I'll stay over here? That is what it comes down to. Icebergs, people at work, Republican, Democrat. There's no wrong or right. It's I'm an animal, you're an animal. We both won't give up. Let's just stay where we are. And it's those two spectrums in everything. If you have got enough, you give, and if you don't, then you'll be selfish. And I think in terms of your question, all these big companies, yeah, they could donate for free, and I'm sure loads do. I just think there's so many issues, so many humans, so much money, and they know that time is running out. If they spend all their profits on all this philanthropy stuff, knowing the coronavirus situation, all of a sudden you lose all your money. So now you're thinking, all these cases and causes and charities I gave to, shit, I can't pay for my big 20 million pound house now. So now it's like, right, things are changing. I don't know when I'm going to lose everything. I can't be affording to fix some fucking icebergs. I need to think of my own children's future and their house and their education. And if I've got 20 million pound house, I need 2 million a year to keep the bills on. So now it's like everyone's becoming aware that time is running out. Now it's becoming dog eat dog. Now it's I'm going to put myself first before you. Hence why these politicians are getting in for the power of themselves and not for the people, because we are all becoming aware that there is a change. But like the Weinstein situation, who's going to blow the whistle first? And it's just like everyone's simmering in their pots and then they're going to grab it,
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of them, they're just kind of waiting around, like you said. But I think ultimately what they're all planning to do is wait around, hold on to their money, and then when shit really hits the fan, they want to buy up everybody that's not doing so well. Everybody wants to capitalize on the situation. They don't want to fix it. They want to capitalize on it. And
Yeah.
that's, unfortunately, that's the mentality that everybody has versus what we said before, that instead of putting that money into something positive, not something philanthropic, not something where there's tax incentives or, you're going to get a nice refund check, but just because you're willing to help the greater good. And there's not enough of that, unfortunately.
Right. Let's end that there. So we've got topics for next time.
Cool.
And anything you want to plug or anything before we end the chat?
Podcast. Sure. Yeah, it's a TNTL podcast. It's Try Not to Laugh. You can find it on basically anywhere you can find podcasts.
Right, I'm gonna stop there. Wait there.